Ladies and gentlemen, this is my proud privilege to welcome you all on the behalf of Vasundhara the Green Society, Law College.
Have the glimpse of what I want to talk. Just please allow me.
Megha, ensure the screen sharing is allowed for sir, please.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, it's
Can I
allowed. Yes, sir, you can. Yes,
Yes, sir, it's enabled, sir.
do?
Visible, sir, perfectly visible, sir.
All right, all right, all right. Thank you, thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
So as I said, the topic of today's talk is sustainable development and evolving legal concept. This topic is very dear to me because I have done research in this area. The topic of my PhD is related with this topic, and I began with the passage from a Stockholm Declaration that took place in 1972. It says that through rapid acceleration of science and technology, we have acquired the power to transform our environment in countless ways and on an unprecedented scale. Humanity's capacity to transform its surroundings, if used wisely and with respect to the ways of nature, can bring to all communities the opportunity to enhance the quality of life. Wrongly or heedlessly applied, the same power can do incalculable harm to human beings and their environment. Now, there are so many people who have the experience and who are listening to me, and we have witnessed how we have damaged our very environment and how true these words are. It is needless to point out that we have growing evidence of human caused harm in many regions of the earth. We are witnessing pollution of water, air, earth, and living beings, destruction and depletion of irreplaceable life forms and natural resources, undesirable disturbances in Earth's climate and protective layers, gross deficiencies, harmful to physical, mental, and social health in the living and working environments of humans, especially in cities and industrial complexes. All around us, we have so many evidences of the fact that in the heedless passion for development and economic growth, we are in a way destroying our very environment on which we depend for our well-being and our existence. Humanity has made many efforts after realizing that we are on a path of destruction. The international community took many steps, and this slide briefly summarizes the steps taken by the international community so far. The first serious effort which was made for the protection of environment in general was the Stockholm Conference on Human Environment 1972. We all know it. All these students who study environmental law, they are aware of these conferences. The Stockholm Conference, Rio Conference on Environment and Development, Kyoto Protocol, and after that, the World Summit on Sustainable Development, which took place in the year 2002, and later on, recently, in Rio de Janeiro, again, a conference on sustainable development was organized by the international community in the year 2012. But we have to understand what has been the result of these conferences? What steps we have taken seriously for the protection of environment? And what is actually the concept of sustainable development? We have to make an assessment as to whether we are making serious efforts, genuinely serious efforts in achieving what is known as sustainable development, or still we are following the same path of destruction which we were doing before 1972. In my talk, I'll try to give a brief summary of what has happened so far and what are the basic principles of sustainable development which have been recognized by our judiciary also. So as I said, the Stockholm Conference on and Human Environment 1972, it was the first major international effort for the protection of environment. But in the Stockholm Conference, while deliberations were taking place, serious differences arose between developing countries and developed countries. Because the perspective of developing and developed countries on issues related with environment were different. The developed countries wanted to convince the developing countries that the path of industrialization should not be followed by developing countries because industrialization has led to destruction of environment in developed countries. But developing countries were not ready to listen to them. They had their own view with regard to environment, with regard to development. India was one of them. And at that time, the Prime Minister of our country, the then Prime Minister of our country, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, was representing India, and she delivered a lecture, which I'll discuss a piece of that lecture in the next slide. But before that, let us try to understand what happened in the Stockholm Conference. In the Stockholm Conference, two documents came into existence. The first document is known as the Stockholm Declaration. The second one is known as Action Plan. But no legally binding document was adopted. Probably it was not possible at that time because it was just the beginning of the concern which the international community was expressing. And there were so many differences between various countries based on their level of development. And that is why, it's my opinion that it wasn't possible to adopt and create any legally binding document at that stage. So it did not take place. However, I think that it was a good beginning. There were so many points on which the international community agreed. Despite the fact that there were plenty of issues which were the points of disagreement between different countries. Mrs. Indira Gandhi at that time, who was the president, who was the prime minister of the country, she said in her speech, rather she asked a question. She said that we do not want to impoverish the environment any further. Yet we cannot for a moment forget the grim poverty of large numbers of people. And then she asked the international community, she said, are not poverty and need the greatest polluters? This question is still pertinent for all of us. We must ponder for a moment and try to understand what this question asks. It says that those people who are living in poverty, in conditions of poverty, those people who are living in conditions of want and need, those people who are struggling, toiling day and night, day in, day out, for their basic needs, for their very existence. How can anybody who is living in comparatively a comfortable situation ask them to protect environment? When the poor people do not know whether they will survive the next day, next couple of days or not, how can they feel concerned about the protection of environment? For them, their own existence is in danger. That is why this question was raised by India at that time in a Stockholm conference. And she said further in her speech that this poverty and other socioeconomic problems related with poverty cannot be eradicated without taking the help of science and technology, without industrializing our country. Because science and technology has got many solutions. Industrialization creates job opportunities that helps the countries to earn their revenue so that they can tackle socioeconomic problems of their own country. Money matters. Money has a great role. No one can outrightly deny the role of wealth. And there is no other way known to humanity so far as the revenue generation is concerned. Therefore, the model that existed at that time and the model that exists even today is that we must make such policies where we may create job opportunities for people so that the people may earn something, and through that we may eradicate the curse of poverty. So again, when we do that, any developing country, any underdeveloped country, if it starts following the path of industrialization in the same way as it has been done in the West, in developed countries, environment will be in danger. But this cost has to be paid. This was something which was said by India. However, India said that we do not want to impoverish the environment any further. We don't want to do that. However, it will happen. It will happen. It is a natural consequence. And therefore, there is a need of balance between the environmental needs and developmental needs. Neither of the two can be outrightly rejected. We cannot ask the humans of today to live in conditions of pure natural environment without taking the benefit of the modern way of development. It is not possible. People are not ready to go into the jungles and live there. Every moment we are developing, we are creating some new thing, and that is something which is a feature of humans, because humans cannot survive without progressing. Every moment humans want to create something new. This quality is inherent in human beings. But this quality needs to be used in such a way that our environment is not affected adversely. We will discuss about it later on in the next part of our lecture. Now, let me tell you something about the action plan, a document which was adopted in a Stockholm conference. This document is again a voluntary action plan. In this document, out of its 109 recommendations, 51 recommendations call for national use of natural resources. Rational use of natural resources. I mean, if we are using our natural resources, we must use them rationally. We must rationalize our behavior. The other thing on which it focused was the transfer of technology from developed countries to developing countries. Because without the transfer of technology, the developing countries cannot be enabled. The developing countries cannot build their capacity to take those actions which are necessary for the protection of environment. And technology is developed more in developed countries. So it is the responsibility of the developed countries to transfer the technology to developing countries on easy terms, so that it may be affordable for the developing countries. So these were the things which were highlighted at that time. Now let us try to understand what the Stockholm Declaration says. Some of the principles I'll discuss only because it is not possible to discuss all of them in a very short span of time. The principle 1 of the Stockholm Declaration says that man has the fundamental right to freedom, equality, and adequate conditions of life in an environment of equality that permits a life of dignity and well-being. And he bears a solemn responsibility to protect and improve the environment for present and future generations. The very first principle highlights some of the fundamental rights of man, and it includes, in addition to freedom and equality, it says that man has the fundamental right to adequate conditions of life in an environment of equality that permits a life of dignity and well-being. If you analyze, you will find that this is nothing but right to healthy environment. Straight away, it has not been said. But if you focus, if you analyze the words which have been used, then this is the meaning that anybody can draw, that it says nothing but right to healthy environment as a fundamental right for human beings. But at the same time, it says that human beings have the solemn responsibility to protect and improve. They do not have only the right, but they have the responsibility also to protect the human environment. For what? For present and future generations. This is very important because environment needs to be protected. But for whom? Both for the present and future generations. Not just for the present generation. The present generation cannot take the needs of the future generations for granted. It cannot say that all that exists today on the planet Earth, our home, belongs to us only. And the future generations do not have any right. No, we can't say that. This is known as, in the language of international environmental law, this is known as intergenerational equity. Principle number 2 says that the natural resources of the earth, including the air, water, land, flora, and fauna, and especially the representative samples of natural ecosystems, must be safeguarded for the benefit of present and future generations through careful planning or management as appropriate. Again, it highlights, again, it describes the various components of our natural environment. It includes air, water, land, flora, and fauna, and all the representative samples of natural ecosystems. And again, it says that it must be protected, it must be safeguarded for the benefit of present and future generations through careful planning and or management as appropriate. So again and again, made the generation realize that, look here, you are going Sorry, there was a call in between. Sorry. Am I audible now? Excuse me.
Yes,
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir. Yes, sir.
Actually, there was a call. So anyway.
Perfectly all right, sir. No problems.
Principle number 3 says that the capacity of the earth to produce vital renewable resources must be maintained and wherever practicable, restored or improved. Earth has its own capacity to produce vital renewable resources. Nothing needs to be done. If Earth is left on its own, it has the capacity to produce vital renewable resources. So the principle number 3 says that this capacity should be maintained and wherever practicable, restored or improved. These are some of the very basic things which were highlighted in the Stockholm Declaration. Now let us try to understand what has been done in Rio Conference in the year 1992. The name of the conference, Rio Conference of 1992, which is also known as Earth Summit first, was United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. In this conference, both the term environment and development were used with equal significance. This conference said that environment alone is not important. Development is also important. And this was the point which was raised by developing countries in the Stockholm Conference. They had said that the developing countries cannot survive without development, without the use of science and technology, without industrialization. They cannot survive in this global world. And therefore, for them, protection of environment alone is not significant, but following the path of development is equally significant, because otherwise they will not have the revenue, they will not have the financial resources to combat the problems of poverty, the problems of ill health, the problems of illiteracy. These are the socio-economic problems for which wealth is required, and wealth cannot be generated unless we adopt the path of industrialization. This was highlighted by the developing countries. And realizing this, the United Nations in 1992, while organizing Rio Conference, it changed the name of the conference, and it said that this is a conference on environment and development both. In this conference, 5 documents were adopted. The first document is Rio Declaration, which is a non-binding document, legally non-binding document. Again, Agenda 21, a legally non-binding document. But 2 conventions were adopted. One convention on biodiversity, the other convention on climate change. These 2 conventions, which came into force later on, these 2 conventions are legally binding documents. So this is the first conference where legally binding documents came into existence. The 5th document is known as Forest Principles, which relates with which talks about some principles for the protection of forests. Rio Conference, in my opinion, is one of the most successful conferences. Here in Rio Declaration, there were 27 principles. It is not possible to discuss all of them, but some of the principles I'll try to discuss. Some of the principles, in my opinion, are more important than the other ones and need to be discussed. So the first principle says of Rio Declaration, it says that human beings are at the center of concerns for sustainable development. They are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. One thing that astonishes me is that here the language has changed. Earlier in a Stockholm Conference, the language was different. In the Stockholm Conference, the first principle talked in the language of right, R-I-G-H-T. Now that term, right, is missing in principle number 1, Rio Declaration. Instead of using the term right, it uses a different language. It says human beings are at the center of concern for sustainable development. So man is at the center. Man is at the center of sustainable development. There are many deep ecologists which disagree with this term, with this proposition. They say that why man is at the center of concern? Why not all other creatures? Every creature is important, equally significant. Even when man was not in existence on this planet, there was environment. And even if someday man perishes from this planet, there will be an environment. And therefore, for them, for deep ecologists, only man is not important. So this very idea of keeping human beings at the center of concern for sustainable development is not agreeable for them, for deep ecologists. Other people, other people have a different perspective, and this perspective is exhibited in principle number 1. Now, the principle number 1 further says that they are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. So the word right has been replaced, and now the term is they are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. If you ask me why it has happened, why the language of right has not been used here, the only answer which comes to my mind is that probably the world community thought that if we use the language of right, it will create additional pressure on the countries in the form of a duty to ensure a healthy environment. And many countries, especially the developing countries and underdeveloped countries, they are not in a position to shoulder such a burden because economically they are not so rich, technologically they are not so advanced, and when they are not having the resources, they will not be able to ensure. Again, there was a call. Principle number 3 says that the right to development must be fulfilled so as to equitably meet developmental and environmental needs of present and future generations. This principle says that human beings have the right to development. Human beings have the right to development because human beings cannot survive without developing. Every moment we take steps in the direction of development. Every day we try to become better than yesterday. And therefore we have a right to development. But right to development must be fulfilled so as to equitably meet the developmental and environmental needs of present and future generations. So here in this principle, 2 kinds of needs have been highlighted. The need, one kind of need is the developmental need, the other kind of need is environmental need. And this need is also the need of both the present and future generations. Therefore, even for a second, we must not forget that all the rights that we have, all the needs that we have, those rights and needs are there for the future generations also, because they will also be placed in similar circumstances. If we overuse the natural resources, the future generations may not be in a position to fulfill their needs because of our shortcomings. Again, principle number 4, it says that in order to achieve sustainable development, environmental protection shall constitute an integral part of the development process and cannot be considered in isolation from it. So if we want to achieve sustainable development, environmental protection needs to be an integral part of developmental process. Now, this proposition, this principle says that whenever you take any step, you make any plan of development, whether a big plan or not so big plan, you must not forget the environment. You must think about the consequences which may follow because of the plan which you want to execute. And therefore, the remedial steps needs to be taken. And the remedial steps must be an integral part of that plan. If we do that, then only we may be in a position to achieve what is known as sustainable development. So similar things have been highlighted. Principle number 5 takes care of the special needs of the developing countries. Principle number 6, it highlights that the situations and needs of developing countries are special, and therefore they should be given a special priority. Principle number 7 says that the responsibilities of the countries, of the world community, are not the same. It uses a very specific language. It says that the responsibilities are common but differentiated. I again highlight so that you may think of it. They are saying that the responsibilities of the states, whether developed or developing, or not so developed, underdeveloped, the responsibilities are common but differentiated. Why they are common? Because no country can say that protection of environment is not its responsibility. Whatever the stage of development of that society or country, the protection of environment is the responsibility of every country. However, repeatedly some people are making calls, and since I'm having a post of responsibility, therefore this is a necessary evil. So please forgive me for that.
Sir, absolutely fine with us, sir. It's only a privilege having you over. Yeah, we completely understand, sir. Thank you so much.
Please excuse me. Please excuse me. So in principle number 7, it talks about common but differentiated responsibility. It says that the responsibility is common but differentiated. Why differentiated? Because it says that different countries, because of their level of different development, because of their stages of different stages of development, they do not have similar responsibility. The responsibilities are different. So those countries which are rich, those countries which are technologically and financially rich, they have got more responsibility as compared to the countries which are not so rich. And therefore, responsibility being common is differentiated. Again, it says that we must reduce and eliminate the unsustainable pattern of production and consumption. The individuals have the right to information with regard to environment. Principle number 15, 16, and 17 are extremely significant of Rio Declaration. They talk about 3 very significant components of sustainable development. One is the precautionary principle, which has been talked in principle number 15, and then polluter pays principle, which has been talked in principle number 16, and environmental impact assessment, which has been highlighted in principle number 17. Today, the time is very short, and it will not be possible to explain these concepts. Some other day, we will discuss on these topics. However, the name themselves explain their meaning. Precautionary principle, it highlights that we must take precaution. Prevention is better than cure. Polluter pays principle says that those people who are indulging in pollution, they have the responsibility to restore the environment, and therefore they should be made to compensate. They must be made to pay. And the judiciary in India has highlighted, while explaining the meaning of this term, it has said that it does not stop with the compensation alone, but the polluter must pay the cost of restoration as well. There is a difference between compensation and cost of restoration. I suggest that every serious student of environmental law must think about it. As far as Agenda 21 is concerned, it's a comprehensive action plan, but a legally non-binding document. But it gives several plans through which different countries may follow the path of sustainable development. If Agenda 21's plans are executed, then we may be in a better world. We may create a better world where both the developmental needs and environmental needs are better met. As far as the legal documents are concerned, I've explained that two legal documents came into existence. One is the Convention on Biological Diversity. The other one is Convention on Climate Change. These two documents in today's world are legally binding documents, and steps are being taken by different countries for the protection of biological diversity. The countries are legislating laws for their own countries at domestic level, and as far as the Framework Convention on Climate Change is concerned, regularly international community is meeting through its conferences of parties, and it is taking steps in order to ensure the reduction in greenhouse gases. However, we have not achieved a great deal of success in this area. Only the time will tell whether we will be able to protect these things or not. And one must not lose hope. Let us strive for that, and we should hope for the best. It's in my opinion. Other conferences which have taken place have not been very successful. Kyoto Protocol was a successful protocol, and steps are still being taken in this in accordance with the provisions of the Kyoto Protocol. But the summits which were organized in the year 2002 and 2012 in Johannesburg and again Rio de Janeiro, these conferences could not result in very fruitful consequences. And the world community in both these summits or conferences was extremely divided between developing countries and developed countries. The developed countries are running away from their promises, which they had made in Rio conference with regard to their commitment to helping the poor countries through financial resources and technology transfer. Developed countries are not fulfilling their promises wholeheartedly as they had promised. So that is a big stumbling block in the achievement of sustainable development. But some people may ask as to what is the concept of sustainable development. How can one understand what the concept of sustainable development is? In short, let me say, there is a very delicate relationship between environment and development. In 1970s, there was a declaration which took place and which is known as Cocoyoc Declaration. It summarized, it said that the purpose of development should not be to develop things, but to develop man. Your sentence is very powerful. It says that purpose of development is not to develop things. Things are not to be developed. Human beings are to be developed. If our focus is on things, then we will not be able to improve the quality of life of human beings. Instead of quality of things, we should focus on the quality of life of the people. That should be the focus of development. This was said by a report which came in 1980, which is known as Report of the Independent Commission on International Development Issues. Brundtland Commission has given one definition of sustainable development. This commission gave its report in 1987, which was published in the form of a book, and that book is known as Our Common Future. It was published in 1987. Mrs. Brundtland was the Prime Minister of Sweden. Under her leadership, this commission was constituted by the United Nations, and that community, that commission gave its report, and that report defines sustainable development in these words. It says that sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. This definition does not very specifically explain the various components of sustainable development. However, it is, in my opinion, it is an humble attempt to give a shape of to the concept of sustainable development. The concept of development is an ever-growing concept. Many new things have been added later on, which I'll highlight in the next slide. This definition of Brundtland Commission says that it is a development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Here again, the definition focuses both on the present generation and the needs and ability of the future generations, which is known as intergenerational equity. So this definition is just a beginning of the concept of sustainable development. As far as India is concerned, in several cases, our judiciary, our Honorable Supreme Court, has highlighted that there are some components of sustainable development which must be kept in mind, and these components have been highlighted by me in this slide. These are the principles. Number one is intergenerational equity, that is taking the interests and needs of both present and future generations into consideration while making any plan. The other one is intragenerational equity. This focuses on eradication of poverty and reducing the gap between standards of life. The third one is integration of environment protection and development. This is the very basic component of sustainable development. These two things cannot be separated from each other. Environment protection and development, they are part of the same process. If we can achieve this stage of development, we will say that we will be in a position to say that we have achieved sustainable development. If environment protection becomes an integral part of development, then it is nothing but sustainable development. Again, the other feature is sustainable use and conservation of natural resources, precautionary principle, and polluter pays principle, which I have discussed earlier. These are the things which have been said by Honorable Supreme Court of India in some of our cases, Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India, and Indian Council for Enviro-Legal Action versus Union of India. In 1990s, these principles were highlighted, and these principles still hold good. Still, the judiciary says that these are the basic principles of sustainable development. Some of these principles have been raised to the level of legal concept. For example, precautionary principle and polluter pays principles have been raised to the level of legal concept. They have been declared to be the part of the law of the land. Environmental law of the land. So once you declare any principle to be the part of the environmental law of the land, it becomes a legal principle. However, precautionary principle and polluter pays principle, these principles are still taking shape. The various components are not, in a final stage as far as their full meaning is concerned. We know that our Constitution has got many provisions, and our Constitution, with the help of Article 21, makes a provision for right to healthy environment in several cases. Our courts have declared that right to healthy environment is a fundamental right, and which is a part of the right to life as enshrined in Article 21 of the Constitution. The students of law know all these things. I do not need to explain these things. Many legislations have been created: Water Act, Air Act, Environment Protection Act 1986, Wildlife Protection Act. These are the basic legislation. Many other legislations have also come into existence, but these are the basic legislations which form the part of the environmental jurisprudence in India. I don't need to explain these acts because that will take a lot of time, but I'll share these slides with Mr. Agrawal and Mr. Dikshit also, so that these slides may be distributed among those students who are interested as far as this concept of sustainable development is concerned. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope my talk is of some use for you. And I again thank the University of Uttaranchal for giving me this opportunity so that I could share some of my views on the subject. The subject is very dear to me, and I always love to speak on it. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. Thanks indeed.
Thank you, sir, for your kind and inspiring words. So there are some questions we got from our audience. First question, why sustainable development so often associated with protecting the environment?
See, sustainable development without protection of environment has no meaning at all. The very concern for sustainable development arose because of the anxiety, because of the concern with regard to environment protection. Only when we realized that our environment is in danger, we started thinking about it. And we started thinking as to why it is happening, why we have put our environment in danger, what kind of behavior we have adopted, and how can we rectify our behavior so that environment is not destroyed and environment is better protected. So the very concern for a new model of development begins with the idea of protection of environment. So it is not very difficult to get the answer. The very foundation of sustainable development is the protection of environment. That is the first target. That is the first goal to achieve. The very purpose of sustainable development is to protect the environment. So it's not very difficult to understand. I hope the answer is complete.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Next question. How can we as a citizen could contribute for fulfilling the goals of sustainable development?
It is easier said than done. But I would like to say that if we behave responsibly, because you see, this problem is one of those governments cannot do anything. If we leave the target of environment protection and sustainable development on the governments cannot do much. Because what is happening? We are producing waste at our home. If we do not know how to handle waste, if we do not behave in a civil manner, the governments cannot do much about it. So individuals have greater role at home. We use many resources at our home. If we are not mindful of how we are behaving with those resources, for example, water. How do we use water? What is the quantity that we use? Where do we get the water from? What kind of water we get? And how should we protect the resources where the water is found? If all these things are not done at individual level, then it will not be possible to protect environment at all. Governments cannot enter our homes. They will not be allowed to enter the threshold of our home. And much is being done at our home. We are producing a great deal of waste at our home. So every single person, whether we are living at home, we are working in our office, we are working in our factories, everywhere we are doing something which has a direct connection with the environment. Either we are directly negatively affecting the environment or we are protecting the environment. If we are protecting the environment, fair enough. But if we are negatively impacting the environment, we must think about it as to what we are doing and how can we rectify our behavior. So every single individual has a role. It goes without saying.
Thank you, sir, for enhancing our knowledge. Next question. What is the role of United Nations in ensuring sustainable development?
United Nations regularly through its various programs related to environment, it is playing its role. It is on organizing conferences and seminars. It is helping different organizations, both governmental and non-governmental organizations, financially and technologically, to take those steps where environment can be protected. Protection of environment is a concern of the entire international community. International community's cooperation is extremely significant. This is one significant problem where international community has role. At national level, the state has role. Every office of the government has role. Every family has a role. Every individual has role. So in ensuring the role of individuals as well as state, United Nations plays very important role. If United Nations had not taken these steps, we would not have seen Stockholm Conference or Rio Conference and other conferences. Only because of the United Nations, these conferences were organized, and we came to realize that we are in a very difficult and dangerous situation. Had it not been so, we would have never realized the dangers. So it has a great role.
Thank you, sir, for answering the question in such a wonderful way. It is such an honor to have you today between us. Thank you so much for coming and bestowing us with your own presence. Now, as we are close to concluding the session, I would request our esteemed chairperson, Dr. Lakshmi Priya Venjamari ma'am, to accord their respective closing remarks.
Thank you, Megha. Good evening once again, sir. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. It's always been a pleasure hearing you. This is the second time I've had the privilege of meeting you on the online mode. And I must really thank Abhiranjan sir for inviting you yet again for this particular topic, because when we spoke of environment, the first person that struck Abhiranjan sir's mind was you. And he told me, yeah, I mean, we should talk to Ahmed sir and see if he can actually join us. So thank you once again, sir, on behalf of Vasundhara, the Green Society and Law. We have much to add because most of you students are being students of environmental law and particular concept of international framework for environmental protection. So I think this is an eye-opener as to the perspective that you need to have to understand the various environmental conventions and declarations that have been passed over the years, right from 1972, around 40 plus years now. And yet the consciousness towards the sustenance of this particular environment still remains to be a very weak. It's like, and it's something that we need to kind of prod on. I know, I'm sure that we need to think, why are we still not getting conscious about what we're doing? And is materialism more, important than life at large? Because when you talk about sustainable development, like Sir said, that there have been various international instruments that have been that have come in from right from the past, but then to be more specific from the 1972 when we had the Stockholm Declaration, and then the Rio Conference, then we had the Kyoto Protocol in 97, then we had various world summits that happened. And then, of course, right now we have the Conference of Parties that keep happening very proactively. But then besides these conferences, deliberations, declarations, and the protocols that we choose to sign, how much of it is it that we are able to, take forward to ensure that we are in an environment which is safe? So, and you're just adding to what Sir has said in his answers, when you talk about sustainable development, you're talking about development for who, and then sustenance of what, right? So so the first thing you're talking about is about the individual who is a part of the environment itself. Sum total includes you also. You're not, you're not away from the environment. You happen to be a part of the environment too, right? So, yeah, it's not what I'm saying. Is one of the famous, scientists has said that, environment is not everything but me. It includes me too. So any which ways, so Sir did dwell at length about the Stockholm Declaration. He did tell us, why and how we need to kind of understand in which perspective the declaration as such and the action plan, of course, of which only 51 of the 109 suggestions have been put to rational use of the various recommendations in the action plan at Stockholm Declaration. Then the very important aspect of technology transfer came in way back. And then this was also dwelt upon by Sir, who went on to discuss about the Rio Declaration, subsequently the 27 principles, and more emphatically about the principle 15, 16, and 17. There's a precautionary principle, 15, polluter-based principle, and environment impact assessment. To my understanding and knowledge and whatever I have done on the ground, the EIA holds a very huge role, and you should understand the impact aspect analysis is something that is going to help us understand the way forward towards sustainable development. So we did have an extremely, I must say, erudite talk by Professor Ahmed Sir today, and I'm sure he didn't leave behind any of this international environmental, framework that actually helps us understand the consciousness that you need for environmental protection at large. So on behalf of Vasundhara the Green Society, I thank one and all, Ritik, Shaurya, Amiga, and the entire BTGS team. And of course, I take this opportunity to thank Sir once again for joining us this evening. And this is the closing day of the 4-day national webinar series being organized in the online mode. We plan to come out in the next year, 2023, in the offline mode, and do hope to have more participation, and so that you can have further deliberations in Dehradun, Uttaranchal University. So wishing you all a very happy new year well in advance. And then thank you so much once again, everybody out there who's asked me to kind of close this particular session. Over to Megha to take the session forward.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would request Mr. Shaurya Negi, convener of Vasundhara the Green Society, to deliver the formal vote of thanks to our honorable guest.
Thank you, Megha. It's a matter of pride for me that I am proposing the vote of thanks on this day. I, Shaurya Negi, on behalf of Vasundhara the Green Society, would like to bring my humble thanks to respected Professor Dr. Naseem Ahmed Sir for taking his time out from his busy schedule and motivating us with his presence. A big thanks to our Pro Vice Chancellor, Dean, Law College Dehradun, Professor Dr. Rajesh Bogna Sir, for gracing us and helping us bring this program to you. I would also like to thank our respected chairperson, Dr. Lakshmipriya Venjamuri ma'am, for motivating and always having our back. I also want to thank all the members of Team BTGS, as well as all the participants who participated in this event and made it a successful one. Once again, I would like to state that we are glad to have you all here. Have a happy new year, and thank you, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Happy New Year.
And now, with the permission of our chairperson, ma'am, I would like to end the session. I repeat, and now with the permission of our chairperson, ma'am, I would like to end the session.
Permission granted, Megha. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.